Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Focus Fridays. I'm going to pause here for a moment just to make sure the recording catches up and we get everybody on board. So this week in our Focus Friday events, we want to talk about tractors. And we're coming up on the season where there's going to be a lot of tractor use. This is not just specific to tree fruits, but there's a focus on that because of roller protective structures. And I'd like to discuss that a little bit. I'm Jeff Lutz. I'm program manager for our safety programs at Washington Farm Bureau. Thank you for being here today. If you are watching this as a recording, thank you for attending. Hopefully, there's some valuable information. We'll have some links on the website that you'll be able to get some information, download, be able to read it, see it. And as this is recorded, then we'll have the opportunity to see this again and again and again as needed because as we learn things, we need to hear it more than once. Adults learn by getting about 20% of what's told them. So we're a lot like kids. It takes us 5 times to hear it. And some of us, like me, it takes more. Thank you for attending. Hopefully, it's some valuable information today. So we're going to go fairly quickly. We've got about 15 minutes. We're going to zoom through this quick. And let's talk about some of the requirements that are part of tractor use. And so there's training elements that need to be done for operators. And these are kind of the high points of it that I'll hit on. Um, Upon initial assignment, and then at least annually, people need to get some training on tractors. And it includes some terrain issues, using roller protective structures, using seat belts, how to hitch, how to operate tractors in your specific areas, and so on. And then on the operating instructions, you can go to our Exhibit A that we'll have attached, and Dominique has those, I believe, in the chat. I'm not going to check for it, but check the chat and make sure that, or in the Q&A, there should be links to a couple of documents that you can use that spell some of this information out. The specific information I mentioned a little about your specific tractor use, your specific area that you're using it in, some hazards that could be associated with that. And then to wrap it up, just make sure that it's all spelled out in your accident prevention program. So, what are some of the initial assignment information? Well, before employees operate their specific tractor, and this would be different models, different makes. If they have some specifics, then that training should be assigned to them before and cover the operational parameters, look at the use of those, making sure that there are some specifics. Well, let me back up real quick on that. The operator's manual is a great source of information for training. If you look at the operator's manual, it'll give you all kinds of documentation of needs for tractor operations. Good to follow that. If you don't have our operator's manual, the internet is amazing because you can grab a bunch of it right off the internet and get manuals for your tractors. You got an older tractor, it might be something that you want to have for manuals. For newer tractors and certainly row crop tractors that are larger tractors, they are so complex with some of the GPS and computer aided information. Definitely operator's manual and any additions that you add to it, apparatus for running the tractors should be reviewed and given to information for employees upon initial assignment. So one of the main things, and this pertains to all tractors, not just not just tree fruit, but using a seat belt in conjunction with rollover protective structures. We call them ROPS or ropes. Make sure that people are using seat belts. We always say to folks, well, when you're driving down the road in your vehicle on the highway, do you wear your seat belt? Well, yes, we do. Well, why is that? Well, because we don't want the fine from the police officer when he pulls us over, he or she pulls us over, and then we don't have our seatbelt on. Ah, but it's also for safety as well. It's the management commitment to make sure that people understand when they're using a tractor, if it's a cab tractor, those are usually ROPS protected. Wear your seatbelt. Well, this thing never going to roll over, right? but your car's never going to crash either, and you wear your seatbelts. So seatbelts are really, really important. When it comes to foldable ROPS, where you're going to lay down collapsible ROPS to get through the orchard, for instance, with an overhead obstruction or an area where there's overhead obstruction in a dairy or in a barn, you're going to want to remove the seatbelt. No seatbelt use when the ROPS is down. But for the most part, when in doubt, use ROPS and use a seatbelt. Make sure that people have some training specifics on, hey, what's our terrain like here? We have ditches on the west side and we've got an embankment over here. There's a big hole over here that we need to be aware of and cognizant of. Reduce our speeds around those. Use caution when working around those. Reduce your speed when you're turning or crossing slopes, or you've got some slick surfaces, muddy areas. It just rained the night before and things are slick. Make sure your speed is reduced. If you're pulling implements, you've got a 400-gallon tank of pesticides that you're pulling behind you, and you're going down a hill that's going to be slippery, and that's going to have a tendency to push you when that tank is full. Make sure that pins are in place and cotter keys are securing that pin where it can't bounce out. All of those would be specifics that you're given to employees. If the slope seems too steep, go to that owner's manual and see what the maximum amount of incline or percentage of grade you can use that particular tractor on. If you need to, you may need to go to a crawler type tractor rather than a wheel type tractor. So just look at the operations where you're going. A directional awareness, making sure that people have an understanding of, hey, you get to the end of a row around obstacles and things, give them some basic training on that information. And when you go to the exhibits that are attached, there's two of them. One is gives some basic information. The other one gives the information on what the actual requirements are that reflect what I'm telling you right now. Passengers, great to say. How many seats does the tractor have? Well, it has one, and therefore there should only be one person on the tractor. Sometimes on larger tractors, row crop tractors, you'll have something that is a learner seat. That's okay. You can have two people in there if there's a seat provided for them. But when they're in a cab like that, they need to have a seatbelt on and wear that seatbelt as a passenger. The problem comes when I'm driving out through the field and I'm heading back to the shop, and I've got an implement on the back of my tractor, and I come across my brother who was walking back to the shop, and my brother says, "Hey, give me a quick ride back to the shop." And I refuse because there's only one passenger seat. Well, I'll just jump on the implement, right? I'll just ride with you. No, how about this? How about I go back to the shop and park the tractor and bring my vehicle over here and pick you up because it has multiple seats and seat belts, no passengers. Remind people that they should avoid sudden starts and stops, that they should do smooth operations. When they operate the clutch, make sure that they're not jerky movements where you could upend a tractor fairly quickly. Just smooth, nice, sudden smooth operations and avoiding those sudden movements. Proper hitching, remind them of center of gravity. By the way, this is all in the exhibit, but it's also part of the operator's manual. Where to hitch, where to connect implements on the 3 points, how to connect, where PTO shafts should be routed, how they are connected, and how they go. And then make sure that people have an understanding of securing that tractor when they're done with it, how to set the brake, how to secure it before they get off of it. In regards to guarding, tractors, implements, machinery should not be operated unless there are point of operation guards in place. It's the responsibility of the employer to make sure those guards are there. It's also the responsibility of the operator to make sure that guards are in place and operational before they use the equipment. Those specifics again, how to avoid rollovers, making sure that non-routine tasks are covered. You might be in areas that you don't normally go, or maybe there's a piece of equipment that you hook up and you rarely use, and therefore you need to have some specific operation discussions on that to assist with the safety of that operation. Make sure that this is all spelled out in your accident prevention program. Make sure that those specifics that are mentioned here are also reflected in your accident prevention program. Let's switch gears a little bit. We're getting close to end of time. and I want to have some discussion on rollover protective structures and tree fruits. So many times we say, oh, well, we are exempt in hops, tree fruits, and vineyards because there's overhead obstructions. There's an overhead obstruction in my dairy barn, so I don't have to have a rollover protective structure, and I don't have to have a seatbelt. That may be true in certain areas where there is a significant overhead obstruction. But the moment you leave that area, you should put the ROPS up. I'm not talking about when you get to the end of the row and turn to go back down the next row. If it takes longer to stop at the end of a row where there's an obstruction, if there's a significant overhead obstruction, and you're using the tractor with no roller protective structure in that area, you've got significant overhead clearance problems. When you get to the end of that row and let's say you're going back to the shop for the end of the day, if it takes less time to stop and put up the roll bar and put a seatbelt on than it does to travel that distance, then you should put the seatbelt on and the roll bar up. There's a directive called the DOSH Directive 33.20 that you can go to and you can look at. I believe it's attached to this. I'm pretty sure I sent that to Dominique to attach to this presentation. That DOSH directive spells out the roller protective structure use in conjunction with overhead obstructions. So my point is, when in doubt, put it up and put a seatbelt on. If you're traveling a quarter mile down the road, it takes less time to stop and put that roll bar up and put a seatbelt on than it does traveling down the road. If you're traveling from one block to another and it's 100 feet, 200 feet, it's going to take more time to stop and put the ROPS up and a seatbelt on than it is to traverse that section that you go into another area that has significant overhead obstruction. If there's overhead obstruction, you're exempt in traveling between those blocks when it's less distance to put the to travel it than it is to stop and put the roll bar up. So remember, if you're in doubt, use the roller protective structure. If you're going very far, make sure that you're using that roller protective structure when there's no significant overhead obstruction. So, okay, that's a whole bunch of information in a really short period of time. If you need more information, make sure you reach out to us. It's a contentious and ambiguous issue with roller protective structure on low profile tractors. We can help clarify that for you. Myself, Dominique, Luis, we can all help you with understanding that issue of using roller protective structures in areas that have overhead obstructions. So with that, Dominique, are there any questions that you see on that?
So I just allowed everybody to speak. If there are questions, because we have a couple people that have called in, but feel free to ask questions now. Just something that I want to point out is that Washington is very strict on rollover protection structures, and one of the benefits of that is we are one of the safest states for agriculture. Just looking up some data from in 2018 is the most current data, and there was 146 workers who suffered fatal injuries in incidents involving tractors, and a lot of that was due to tractor rollovers. Not all states require that, that tractors have to have rollover protection structures or ROPS, and that is something that is Washington goes above and beyond, and there is a reason for that. So
Dominique, if I may real quick clarify, that 146 was across the nation, correct?
across the nation,
Yep,
yes. In
that's national.
2018, I can't remember how many we had in Washington, but it wasn't close to that.
Thank you.
All right, still not seeing any questions.
There are two attachments, correct?
Two attachments, including the DOSH directive that says that if you do have your ROPS down, it must be on a low profile tractor, and that it must be because you have significant overhead obstruction.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. No questions. This is recorded and this will be available at some point here in the near future.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Have a good day.